It sort of rehashed old revelations with a new twist. As it turns out, we've apparently been wrong all along. Britain is a nasty, racist hellhole where only magnificent Meghan stood up to all this, and the world's biggest victim.
The hope of California is blazing. In Montecito, Prince Harry is hastily packing his stuff in anticipation of leaving the multi-million-dollar estate that was meant to stand for liberty, tranquility, and a new beginning. However, this is hardly a light-hearted trip to his native country. This has nothing to do with family healing or reconciliation. This is an attempt to flee, a last-ditch effort to get institutional protection that he previously publicly rejected and mocked. The timing couldn't be more perfect. Piers Morgan has released pictures that have shocked people on both sides of the Atlantic as Harry gets ready to leave. These aren't innocuous party photos or holiday photos from Meghan Markle's past. These pictures of yachts show her in high society and have unsettling ties to the world that Ghislaine Maxwell commanded and Jeffrey Epstein created. Harry's carefully crafted life in California is in danger of being consumed by the same social environment that wrecked Prince Andrew's reputation and drove him into everlasting exile from public life. Additionally, the prince, who after years of destroying every royal bridge, he is now sprinting back across the burned remnants in search of refuge in the very establishment he denounced as cruel, racist, and poisonous. The shocking revelation from Piers Morgan that altered everything. Piers Morgan has never shied away from controversy. However, what he disclosed in his most recent interview went well beyond standard tabloid rumors. Morgan disclosed information that led to more than 57,000 complaints to ITV while seated across from his interviewer with his signature expression that indicates he's holding cards no one else has seen. For having the audacity to challenge the Duchess of Sussex, many people called for his immediate dismissal. Social media erupted in support of Meghan as the outrage machine went into overdrive. However, this is where the narrative takes a terrifying turn. Behind the scenes, Meghan Markle personally got in touch with Morgan's superiors and put direct pressure on them to remove him. Nor via formal channels, nor via her powerful public relations team, but directly trying to stifle a journalist whose inquiries were getting too awkward to ignore. And yet he is unwaveringly uncanceled, as Piers himself pointed out with hardly disguised satisfaction. Why? Because the evidence he has been painstakingly gathering for years is utterly disastrous and is only now starting to come to light. When seen through the prism of later events, the boat photos depict Meghan in settings that are profoundly significant. We're examining recorded appearances at upscale Soho House overseas launches, such as one in Istanbul in 2015, where insiders characterize her function as a social filler. Although that phrase may come out as condescending, it serves a very useful purpose. Attractive, affable people who fill rooms before the true power players show up are referred to as social fillers. Individuals who create vibrant, cozy, and welcoming settings. There are no spotlights or public accolades associated with this role, but there are rooms available where there are no paper traces and no cameras. Traveling internationally, making appearances on opulent yachts, and constantly moving through elite circles made up of millionaires, power brokers, and those whose wealth and influence operate far from the public eye. Not just once or twice, but continuously, repeatedly, recorded throughout several continents and years. The calculations that never added up. It was at this point when attentive spectators began to notice something odd. Meghan Markle was a supporting actress on the cable television series Suits, which had a devoted but small viewership at the time these pictures were taken. She had a recurring position as a paralegal, but it wasn't exactly one that would earn her a Hollywood star pay. According to industry sources, her income during that time would have been adequate, but it would not have been close to what was needed for the apparent lifestyle she was leading. A modest six-figure salary from a cable show just isn't enough to pay for private jet travel abroad, appearances on opulent Mediterranean boats, lodging at Europe's five-star hotels, and frequent attendance at upscale gatherings attended by the ultra-wealthy. It is impossible to overlook the mathematical disparity. How is it possible for a working actress on a somewhat popular television series to live like a billionaire these days? Where did the money come from? Who was enabling this access to exclusive social groups that were normally inaccessible to anyone who wasn't extremely wealthy or had extraordinary connections? Piers Morgan made connections that others saw but said nothing about. The way of life, the closeness to extreme riches, the presence in rooms where strong men unwinded, the blurring of boundaries, and the apparent temporary suspension of social norms. Meghan was not charged with any offenses that would be improper in the absence of proof. Rather, people engaged in a far more subdued and possibly hazardous activity. They recorded observations, pointed out discrepancies, and waited. Memory has patience. It doesn't require quick responses. It only stores data as it waits for context, which could come years later. And those old memories suddenly gained explosive new importance when the same woman from the boat images emerged next to a prince, wearing a title, waving from palace balconies, and emerging as one of the world's most renowned ladies. The Maxwell-Ghislaine factor. Ghislaine Maxwell is presently incarcerated for 20 years at a federal prison in Florida. Her social dominion has collapsed. Her impact has vanished. Razor wire and concrete walls define her future, and she will probably perish in prison.
Maxwell was just sentenced to 20 years behind bars for her part in grooming young girls to sexually service Jeffrey Epstein and his friend.
And that's precisely what makes her so dangerous. Here's a basic fact of human nature that prosecutors are well aware of. When silence still serves their interests, people remain silent. When they still have friends who could be of assistance, when they still have negotiating power, and when they still have hope that things will get better. None of those are possessed by Ghislaine Maxwell. Her old pals had deserted her. Her riches have been taken from her. She is no longer free. Her legacy has been destroyed. Beyond repair, she has nothing at all. Left to lose and possibly something to gain by working together. Several people with ties to federal investigators claim that Maxwell has begun speaking in names rather than ambiguous clues or well-crafted recommendations. Real names, particular people who passed through the same high-level social circles that she and Jeffrey Epstein formerly dominated. The intersection between Meghan's and Maxwell's worlds during the crucial years in question is symbolized by the Soho House relationship. Although that was undoubtedly its public image, Soho House was more than just a chic private club for artists and creatives. These foreign sites functioned as infrastructure behind the scenes, opening doors between worlds that don't usually interact directly. Hollywood and global finance came together. The fresh cash brushed shoulders with traditional aristocratic authority. People who avoided cameras at all costs came into contact with those who desired attention and publicity. These weren't haphazard social events. When influential guests arrived, these carefully chosen spaces were meant to feel lively and energetic. The ideal balance of charm, beauty, and discretion, as well as the appropriate energy and faces in the space. And Meghan Markle was flown all over the world to be one of those faces that filled rooms with the kind of ambience that made strong men feel at ease and giving. The Guppy connection in Virginia. This is where the story shifts from awkward rumors to actually significant legal issues during Virginia Jew's civil lawsuit. The woman whose testimony completely ruined Prince Andrew's reputation and sent him into eternal banishment from his royal duties. The name Meghan Markle almost made it into the courtroom, not in the role of a defendant. As a possible witness, that crucial distinction is extremely important. Witnesses are not charged with crimes. They are only individuals who might have witnessed, heard, or been present at events that subsequently had legal significance. There were 3 distinct reasons why investigators thought about summoning Meghan to testify, according to court-related positioning that surfaced during discovery. First, there were no foreign legal issues because she was a resident of the United States, which made jurisdictions simple. Second, during a particular era that coincided with alleged abuse, she was identified as a close acquaintance of Prince Andrew. Moreover, third, she was alleged to have been a part of Jeffrey Epstein's larger social circle in years when illegal behavior was ongoing. In the end, she was not asked to testify. Before that was required, the matter was settled. However, the result was not harmful. The reason for this was that after reviewing Meghan's background, seasoned federal investigators with subpoena authority felt there was something important to inquire about under oath. In a federal prosecution involving sex trafficking and abuse, you are rarely called as a witness unless investigators have specific reasons to think your testimony could be useful. If anyone had been paying attention, the near miss ought to have been a clear warning. Rather, it was subtly obscured by the media's non-stop coverage of fairy tale romance stories and royal wedding preparations. Years later, as Ghislaine when Maxwell speaks from behind bars and Piers Morgan publishes photographic evidence, his testimony appears to be a gunshot that was momentarily evaded but never really avoided. Montecito lost paradise. Montecito has become totally untenable for the Sussex family at the same time that the boat scandal explodes on every media outlet on both sides of the Atlantic. There is more than one issue. This is a catastrophic confluence of failures occurring simultaneously, each contributing to and intensifying the others. Harry and Meghan have been completely shut off by Montecito's affluent neighbors. There are no invitations to charitable events in the area. They have been subtly deleted from guest lists at dinner parties that used to include them without any justification. The upscale coffee shops and boutiques that first welcomed the well-known couple have apparently turned into awkward places where Meghan feels condemned rather than honored. The situation was aptly described by a local insider who spoke on condition of anonymity. There are real celebrities in this community that don't stir up global controversy wherever they go. We respect caution, privacy, and those who make constructive contributions to the community. Cameras, controversy, and non-stop mayhem were brought about by the Sussexes. They are no longer welcome here. The financial strain is even more severe than the social exile. The streaming behemoth Netflix, which offered the couple more than $100 million in a deal that garnered international attention, is essentially cutting ties. The anticipated content never materialized in any significant way, which has infuriated executives. Instead of gaining the sympathetic audience Netflix had hoped for, the documentary series became a complaint carnival that drove off viewers. Later initiatives either failed or brilliantly or stuck in a never-ending state of development hell. According to industry insiders, Harry and Meghan's relationship has completely worsened and Netflix is practically done giving them more opportunities. In the harsh words of one source in the entertainment world, the stats are clear. Harry and Meghan aren't providing Netflix with the level of audience engagement or subscription retention that the company anticipated for such a large financial investment. In essence, they are poison to the brand. The Archwell Foundation staff departure, on the other hand, reads like a case study and organizational catastrophe. In quick succession, 11 individuals, 11 seasoned experts who uprooted their life to construct what was meant to be the Sussex empire, left the ship. This includes Executive Director James Holt, who moved his whole family from the UK, especially to assist, and was heavily featured in their Netflix documentary, Construct the Archwell Vision. He stayed long enough to see that the operation was essentially hopeless before stealthily leaving. Before making his getaway, the head of public relations lived for precisely 7 months. 7 months. That kind of quick departure is always a warning sign that the leadership is dysfunctional, the work climate is unbearable, or both in the non-profit and public relations sectors. It's getting harder to overlook the financial strain that the Sussex family is under. The purchasing price of that Montecito home was $14 million. Each year, property taxes alone amount to 6 figures. Just to maintain the amount of protection they feel they need, security costs several $million annually. They've built a lifestyle that demands steady, significant income flow, which isn't happening anymore. With executive Bill Simmons notoriously referring to Harry and Meghan as grifters on his podcast as he was leaving, Spotify had already crumbled miserably. In essence, Netflix is done with them. Speaking engagements and book agreements have decreased as public interest declines and criticism grows. Meghan is actively looking for places to flee, according to several sources. Texas's absence of a state income tax has been brought up time and time again. Many European nations have been investigated as potential options, especially those with advantageous tax agreements and privacy safeguards for affluent citizens. She is desperate to leave the community that has rejected her so completely. However, this is the existential issue that geographical movement is unable to resolve. Photographs of Piers Morgan's yacht are currently making the rounds on all media platforms worldwide. Furthermore, Ghislaine Maxwell's prison testimony is unaffected by the state in which you reside, the nation in which you relocate, or the number of attorneys you retain. The pregnancy debate that never goes away. Piers Morgan's earlier accusations of pregnancy irregularities are returning with terrible new weight as the yacht photos go viral and inquiries about Meghan's past grow more intense every day. What else has been a theatrical performance rather than the truth, since the boat narrative demonstrates that Meghan created a carefully crafted public persona that differs from documented reality. The public is now re-examining the pregnancy irregularities that Morgan discovered years ago with new attention, and the patterns are truly unsettling when seen as a whole rather than as isolated instances. The Princess of Wales, Catherine, was outside the Lindo Wing Hospital. Just hours after giving delivery, she was cradling her babies in front of everyone while wearing heels, immaculate makeup, and flawlessly styled hair. On 3 different occasions, she showed total openness, respected royal customs, and enjoyed happy moments with the monarchy-supporting populace. Meghan, on the other hand, transformed her pregnancy into a mystery thriller in which the plot drastically shifted with each chapter, causing doubt and confusion where there ought to have been joy. After a week, the baby bulge was noticeable, round, and unmistakable. She held it with both hands all the time in that characteristic position that expectant mothers are familiar with. She moved with excessive caution, as if she were transporting valuable goods that could break at any moment. The bump would then appear much smaller, flatter, and positioned very differently on her body in photos taken days later, sometimes even within the same week. The movement patterns were considerably more illuminating and hard to describe using standard progression of pregnancy. In some of the film, Meghan was seen walking carefully and deliberately, her hands wrapped around her tummy for protection. Then all of a sudden, in other appearances from almost the same time period, she is swiftly ascending stairs, turning around with ease, bending down with ease, and moving with no discernible physical constraints. We're not referring to the slow changes that occur over several months as a pregnancy develops organically. We are discussing significant variations that can occur in a matter of days or even hours. A woman who is so heavily pregnant that she cannot move comfortably is seen in one public appearance. She's almost performing acrobatics in 5-inch stiletto heels the following day. Internal royal scheduling documents started circulating among palace personnel, according to allegations that emerged during the pregnancy but were never adequately addressed or refuted. For security purposes, these records allegedly monitored Meghan's appointments and travels during her pregnancy, and logistical considerations, as is customary with working royals. The issue. On several days, when Meghan was pictured by several independent sources attending public events, hospital appointments were purportedly recorded, unobstructed throughout London. Efficient scheduling could account for the lack of close timing. She was in one area for entire days, according to official documents, while photographic evidence from other sources put her in a different location. You can't be in 2 places at once. Timelines for pregnancies are rigid and unchangeable. Meghan either covertly attended medical visits while the public appearances were staged with someone else, or the paperwork were falsified for unspecified reasons. Neither choice makes sense or presents a positive image of any of the parties. Next, it was this element that caused even casual spectators who had supported Meghan to begin to doubt the official story. The promise of a home birth that mysteriously disappeared. Meghan had carefully disclosed her desire for a private home delivery at Frogmore Cottage to reliable palace insiders. Natural and intimate, rejecting the icy rigidity of media circuses and hospital rules. This perfectly logical preference was unquestionably approved by the public. There didn't seem to be anything strange about the decision made by many women to give birth at home. Then came May 6, 2019. Meghan unexpectedly delivered birth at the upscale Portland Hospital in London without a word of justification or clarification. Nor at home, nor at the location that was made public, at an entirely unrelated hospital that had never been brought up in any previous statement. There was no justification provided. There was not a single word in the royal communications explaining why the plans were altered. There was no discussion of health issues that would logically call for hospital facilities. There was no acknowledgement of the altered plans that had been made so widely known. There was a deafening, suspicious quiet that caused many to reconsider all of the earlier statements and wonder how much of the meticulously crafted narrative had ever been true. And this is where the illusion finally begins to fracture. Not all at once, not in a single explosive revelation, but in the most dangerous way possible, piece by piece. A photograph here, a document there. A timeline that no longer aligns. A silence that grows louder with every passing day. Because history has shown us something very clear. When powerful stories collapse, they don't fall because of one accusation, they fall because too many questions remain unanswered for too long. What makes this moment different is not just the resurfacing of old images or forgotten connections. It's the timing. The world is no longer distracted. The media cycle is no longer sympathetic. And the people who once protected these narratives, institutions, corporations, social circles, are quietly stepping away. When allies retreat and doors close, the truth doesn't need to scream. It simply waits. For years, critics were dismissed as conspiracists, haters, or troublemakers. Doubts were buried beneath glossy interviews, carefully staged appearances, and emotionally charged storytelling. But emotion cannot overwrite mathematics. It cannot erase travel records, financial realities, medical timelines, or witness proximity. At some point, even the most polished narrative begins to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. And perhaps the most unsettling part of all of this is not what has been proven, but what has never been properly explained. Why certain plans changed without reason. Why certain questions were never addressed directly. Why access was granted where it made no logical sense. Why silence followed moments that demanded transparency. These aren't accusations, they are gaps. And gaps are where investigators, journalists, and historians eventually look first. Meanwhile, the walls are closing in quietly, deals are dissolving, invitations are disappearing, staff are leaving, public goodwill is evaporating. This isn't a scandal burning brightly, it's a reputation freezing over. And once that freeze sets in, there is no dramatic comeback, no redemption arc, no carefully timed interview that can undo it. Because truth doesn't need momentum. It doesn't need public approval. It doesn't even need belief. It only needs time. And time is the one thing no one can control. So the question now is not whether more information will emerge, it's when. And when it does, will it confirm the story we were told, or expose the one we were never meant to see? Because once the curtain lifts, it never fully closes again. This story isn't over. It's just entering the phase where silence becomes evidence.